Hello, my name's Carl Kochart and I'm a technical architect at Microsoft. In this video, we're going to take a look at locations-based routing, which is a Microsoft Teams direct routing configuration that ensures that end users cannot utilize toll bypass when making or receiving PSTN calls. This type of deployment is required for countries where it's necessary to restrict toll bypass based upon a user's location. In my lab, I have an SBC called London 1 configured for locations-based routing and non-media bypass. Note that I could also have configured my SBC for media bypass, which is actually mandated for some countries. Apart from switching on the LBR setting on the Microsoft SBC config, no other specific locations-based routing parameters need to be enabled on the SBC component of the system. I also have two users, Deborah and Lydia, who are enabled for locations-based routing via their calling policy, which we will take a look at in a moment. Deborah and Lydia's routing policy contains routes that point to the London site's SBC. The rest of my locations-based routing configuration consists of the trusted IP address for the London site, as well as a network topology configuration that contains a region, a site called London, and the subnet or subnets associated with my London site. In my configuration, the London site is enabled for locations-based routing. Locations-based routing is relatively straightforward to configure, but in my opinion, its operation is actually very complex, and multiple call scenarios such as basic call, transfers, and delegation will be impacted. Throughout the rest of this video, we will look at a few example call flows, but you are highly encouraged to review the Microsoft documentation that provides a thorough explanation of how calls will be routed based upon a user's location. As shown, the calling policy that enables location-based routing is called Prevent Toll Bypass and send calls through the PSTN. In my lab, the UK PDU locations-based routing policy is assigned to Deborah and Lydia. In this first example, Deborah calls Greg. As Deborah is in London and her call plan includes the London SBC, her outbound call is successful. Note that because the SBC is configured for non-media bypass, the media flow that's negotiated via the SIP ICE candidates will traverse the Microsoft Cloud. We can also see this in the RTP sniffer trace. When Greg calls Deborah, the incoming PSTN call arrives at the London SBC. Again, because Deborah is in London, toll bypass won't occur, so the call is successfully set up. The signaling and the sniffer trace verify that the media flow is through the Microsoft Cloud. In this next example, Greg rings Lydia. Lydia is at an unknown location. This could be somewhere within her organization that's not defined within the topology configuration, or alternatively, somewhere on the internet. Because of this, the call does not arrive at Lydia's Teams client, but is actually routed to voicemail. This is because if the call was placed to Lydia, it would result in a toll bypass scenario, which isn't permitted under a Microsoft Teams location-based routing configuration.
Lydia Holloway is currently unavailable. Please leave a message after the tone.
Now, when Lydia tries to call Greg from the same unknown location, the call is blocked. This is to prevent Lydia making a toll bypass call out of the London SBC. As mentioned previously, There are many other media flow scenarios a system design needs to validate, such as calls associated with roaming users to other locations-based routing sites or to known network sites that aren't enabled for locations-based routing. It's highly recommended that you read through the Microsoft documentation to ensure you fully understand how a locations-based routing configuration will treat any inbound or outbound PSTN call from any given site or location in a real-world scenario.